Hey everyone, welcome again to the latest installment of The Way It Is. And I'm your host, Luca here at Remax Service First Realty. And I am very pleased and excited to have with me Erin Provost, who's the president, recently elected president of the local CUPE 1480 chapter here in the Kingston area. And we wanted to have Erin on earlier, but of course this comes on the heels of the latest negotiations that happened and the contract ratification that happened with her organization. And of course, Erin has been busy over the last month or so contending with that. So Erin, thank you very much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Right. Oh, okay. And I always forget, if you like what you see and everything, ring your bell, save it, share it, do all those kinds of social media things. So let's start, I guess, with, we were just having a bit of a preamble earlier before we were getting set up. Your background is early childhood education.
Correct.
What took you to the stream of organized labor, I guess?
My last workplace, we had a little bit of an incident where somebody was fired and we didn't think that was just. So we thought we needed to unionize. So another coworker and I unionized the workplace. That's kind of how I got involved in it. And then when I came to the school board, I don't think I knew we had a union for a few years. And then one of my coworkers asked if I would run for a steward position, and I said sure, and that was in 2014, and I've just been involved ever since.
Wow. Well, because you were part of the Limestone District School Board, right?
Yes, I'm still.
You're still okay.
Yeah.
But that's when you become part of that board. Are you not automatically incorporated into the local union?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, but I don't recall getting that information when I was first hired, so I don't think I really looked into it or really paid much attention at the time to know that there was a union in place.
Right. So sort of similar things, because you've been since October 20, you were elected the president of the chapter. Had you served in the sort of hierarchy of the union at that point in time, or had you served on the board?
I was a steward for a few years, and then I became the chief steward, and then just ran for president after that. Yeah.
Wow. And you got elected, which is great. Yeah. So obviously you had some support, which is good. So Bill, what was it? Bill
28.
28, yes. So you had all the hassle with the notwithstanding clause and all of that. And then they lifted that. You went back and forth. And then recently you've ratified the current agreement, which will go through till 2026. I've just got some quick stats here that Rob Meinman pulled off for me, but you had almost 73% of your membership.
73% of the membership across Ontario. Correct.
Yeah, voted in favor of the contract. And why don't you talk us through then sort of, I guess, what are the pertinent highlights of this agreement for your membership then? I mean, I know everybody heard the big $1 per year increase and everything else, but maybe flesh out some more sort of salient sort of.
There really isn't a whole lot, which is quite disappointing because we had asked for quite a bit more. We asked for supports for students and the government said no. But they didn't touch our sick leave, so our sick leave stays the way it is. We have our flat rate of $1 because we went for $1 because a 1% increase or a percentage increase on our salaries versus a percentage increase on the teachers' salaries is a lot different.
Right.
So we wanted to go with something that was substantial for our members that haven't seen anything in over a decade. They didn't touch our benefits. We got a little bit of an increase for that, but it doesn't increase any of the benefits that we get. It just maintains the benefit trust for the next 4 years.
Right.
So.
And so, because that was something I was going to talk about, how come it's been a decade that there hasn't been a contract in place, I guess, or there hasn't?
Well, we've had a contract in place, but in 2012, Bill 115 was imposed, I believe, and that legislated us to 0% for the few years after that. And then after that, it was Bill 124 that legislated us at 1%. So we haven't been able to freely negotiate our wages in over a decade because of the government.
Wow. So that would have been previous governments too. That would have
Yeah.
been the Liberal government
Yeah.
that would have, Kathleen Wynne, that would have
Yes.
brought that into play and
Yes.
everything like that. So you can't really throw, well, I mean, you can say what you want about the current government, but they obviously inherited that existing legislation from before. What do you think triggered their, and again, I mean, most people obviously, the unfortunate part about all of this, I mean, you're in the middle of it, so you see more of it and have the context where unfortunately everybody else just gets the media sound bites and the, out of context information. But it certainly seemed like the government was heavy-handed, right? I mean, that seems to be the general consensus.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think the reasoning for that was? Was there any explanation for that on your end, like when you were sitting table, like across the table from anyone, or maybe you weren't?
Well, I I came in late, so the previous Area 5 VP stepped down, so I came in October. So we only ever sat across from the government once while I was there, and then we filed for conciliation, so we were separate after that.
Okay.
But everything we asked for was a no. And I'm not sure why. I do believe that Doug Ford wants to privatize education, and so he doesn't want to put any more money into it. Because if he dismantles it and it's broken, then it's more of a positive spin for him to try to start privatizing the education sector.
Well, I hadn't heard that, but that's that's a whole big hornet's nest of a lot of stuff there. My gosh, I mean, look what I mean, having gone through the pandemic with senior facilities being privatized, I can only imagine what would happen to education. But that's kind of frightening. So this goes till 2026. I mean, I guess was the union sort of just happy to get what they got, I guess, and was that sort of the mindset going into it, or like was there a push to go back and ask for more?
There was a little bit of both. So we were at the table, we were very upset that this was all we were going to get, that it was made very clear to us that we weren't getting any more. So that meant we weren't getting any supports for students. And that meant that our workers continue to be overworked and overloaded and not have enough time to help the students that they do help, or not enough hours in the day to do the job that they're supposed to be doing. So it was very hard for us to say, okay, we'll take it back to the membership. But on the other hand, the membership wanted to see what the government had proposed and wanted a chance to vote on it. So we gave them what they wanted and let them vote on it.
Right. And I mean, there's 55,000 approximately education
Yeah.
workers, right? And I mean, given the fallout of the pandemic, because we're seeing it throughout our healthcare system and through the school system, everything. I mean, there's still a shortage of workers, right?
Yes.
I mean, and
They can't fill our jobs now.
right.
They couldn't fill our jobs last year. They couldn't fill them during the pandemic. Nobody wants to work in schools where they're paid so little but have to do so much.
Right.
Nobody wants to do our jobs when they're getting beat up every day.
Yeah.
So it's not an attractive job anymore.
And it's not just educators, right? This goes down to like caretaking staff, custodial staff,
Right.
all of that
Yeah.
too, right?
And so they're cutting back on custodial staff. So more of the cleaning and more of the caretaking is being put on to the people that are there instead of hiring more people to do all of the work that's required in the building.
So, I mean, again, this dollar, let's put this into context, and I'm hoping you can answer this question, but what is the average income of like one of these 55,000 members, I guess? What's that?
So the average across Ontario came out to be $39,000.
Okay.
I can say in our local, the average is much lower. It's more like 35,000, 36,000.
Okay. Yeah.
So, when you look at it at $1 an hour, it's still not very much, especially when a lot of our members are actually visiting food banks as it is, or having trouble paying the rents, or paying the bills that are skyrocketing. So, that extra, and our hours are capped at 6 or 7 a day. So, it's that $1 an hour is $6 a day. It doesn't add up to a whole lot to give that much of financial
Right.
relief to our members.
Right. And then your initial, because the initial ask was for like $4 or something.
$3.25.
And you see, and sitting back, I mean, and I know when we exchanged some emails, I certainly don't want to politicize this at all or anything like that. But I know where I sit. From where I sit, I often just wondered why the government just didn't go ahead and give the increase, given it's been a decade, right, of frozen things. And I'm not trying to placate, you know what I'm saying, the union members or anything like that. I'm just from where I stood in terms of being business for self. And if you're running the province like a business, and this is part of your business plan, why wouldn't you have just done that? You would have gone more political traction, more political reward from doing that, costing it out and doing it over the next 4 years or 5 years, right? And breaking it out that way than to have gone through all the angst and anguish and alienation, like everything that he's created. Because now there's just a pile of acrimony, I'm going to guess, right? So,
Yeah. Like I said, I think it goes back to his plan to privatize. There was some talk about a voucher system for private schools in Ontario. And I think he's very pro-privatization, and I think that's the way he would like to turn the education system. So he doesn't want to put a whole lot of money into us when he's hoping his privatization would take off.
yeah. Well, I mean, he came from an entrepreneurial family, right? I mean, that's in his blood.
And the same with Stephen Lecce.
Yeah. So the next big issue is Bill 124, if
Yes.
I'm not mistaken, right? So this is a bill that caps public sector wages, limiting the salary increases to 1% annually,
Yes.
right? So the big knock against that, obviously the criticism against that is that it doesn't even raise it to even come close to inflation, obviously. And that flies in the face of especially increases that were given to MPPs. My Rob, he's a great researcher here. This license plate sticker refund where people got checks. And that was, sorry, I'm just going to go off topic or not digress for a second, but that's the other thing that really annoyed me. So he pulls the notwithstanding clause and then sends families checks for $600 across the province, which would have cost just as or more.
Which would have paid for the entire first year increase in the contract.
See, there you go. I didn't know the math to that, but now that you tell me, now that makes me even more infuriated.
Yeah.
Like how that doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
No.
So it was all political.
It was, yep. And we did have parents reaching out, asking where they could donate that money to help CUPE members.
Wow.
So we did have some parents reach out and ask, where can I send this money? So some parents sent it directly to the school to be used to help their support staff there. Some of them donated it to some food banks because they know that our members use food banks. So that was really positive, but it was a slap in the face to hand that out to parents, but then say, no, we don't have money for you.
I'm going to go back to that, but I just thought, so given the shortage of staff and the shortage of workers, and that's I don't think that issue is going to resolve itself anytime soon, unfortunately, for a number of reasons. But and I got to be careful how I don't want to come across as sexist or anything like that. But back in the day, there were PTAs or there were parent groups, right, and stuff. Are we seeing a proliferation of those, or is that happening at all to help make up some of the slack or pick up some of the slack for, like, you know what I'm saying, after school programming or something like that? I mean, I'm so far removed from the elementary school system and the post-secondary, the high school system. My kids are grown and gone and everything like that. So I certainly don't have, any insight into what happens on the ground, I guess.
And I don't think there is as much involvement of that like there was probably when we went to school. So, they do the fundraising for the school and the consumables, but there isn't a whole lot of after school activities for the kids.
Right.
And when our jobs don't get filled, there's the list of emergency workers. So Johnny's grandma could be coming in and doing my job for the day because they don't have anybody else to come and fill it.
Wow. Yeah, you try not to dwell on that kind of stuff for too long. So when is this Bill 124, I guess, going to come up for? Well, they're appealing it, right?
It was appealed and it was found to be unconstitutional.
Right.
So, sorry. It was in the courts. It was found to be unconstitutional. Ford is appealing it and, wasting the money that
provincial
they said
coffers, yeah.
they don't have for us to appeal a bill that was determined to be unconstitutional. And then I believe it'll probably be determined that they owe some kind of remedy like they did with 115. So then that's another billions of dollar payout to the education sector and the nurses and everybody that the bill affected, when he could have done the right thing at the beginning
Right.
instead of dragging it through the courts.
What, and so is this ongoing? Like, so obviously you have to wait for the appeal to end.
Yeah.
And then barring that, is there any more negotiation to do though, or anything, or what's left? Like, I mean, did the union ask for a certain increase and then it was voted? Sorry, just fill me in on sort of the background in terms of where it got to the appeal now and everything.
So the Bill 124 was we were done our stint, I guess you call it.
Okay.
It was put in place for 3 years for our sector, and for every sector they had their turn. So we did our 3 years, and that's how we could negotiate wages. So now that it's appealed, it's probably still in place for the other sectors that I believe it's nurses that have it now. But we'll have to wait until it goes through the courts to see if we have any kind of remedy to that. And it'll
Right.
probably be a lump sum payment like we got for Bill 115.
Right. Okay. I might bring the conversation a bit more high level now. I was with some friends and clients yesterday, and they said, "Who's your next guest in the podcast?" So I mentioned you were coming on, and we talked about sort of the history of unions, the raison d'etre for them back in the day, and is that reason still relevant? And I guess, I certainly I'm not putting you on the spot or anything, but I'd love to hear, I guess, your personal insights in terms of, are unions still, like, I mean, is your union thriving? Do you find, is there an appetite for it still? Or how do you see unions' place in the world that we live in today, I guess, and stuff?
I think for the past few years, unions have kind of taken a back seat, and a lot of people haven't really been interested. But because of the government overreach and the bills imposed and the legislation imposed, people are turning more to unions now to fight collectively for their rights as workers. And I think that's kind of how we got to the unionization movement in the first place, was people needed to band together. So in my experience with the union, it's been quite slow. Our membership wasn't engaged much at all. We'd have a handful of people turn out to things or run for anything. But this round of central negotiations, we saw more engagement in the union in our local and across the province than has been seen in decades.
Right.
So there's a need for it. And I think with the government continually stepping in, people are turning back to their unions now to say, hey, you need to help us out here.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, and there was backlash. There always is backlash, and I know when the teachers' time comes, there's going to be backlash too, because there's always a perception out there that people are either overpaid and don't do,
Which is really unfair, because nobody really understands the amount of work that a teacher does or that an education worker does, because your day just isn't from 9 to 5. You don't clock in and clock out. We're the only sector that takes work home with us to do, because there's not enough time to do during the day. There's not enough paid time to do it. And yes, we have the summers off, but that's not paid time.
Right.
Teachers are paid 12 months, or they're 10 months over 12 months. Education workers go on EI in the summer. So there's this perception that we're just being paid for 12 months a year, and for so many weeks of the year, we're doing absolutely nothing. But I can tell you, we're still in schools in the summer getting it ready. Our caretakers are still in there cleaning.
Yeah.
Teachers are in there setting up.
Well, I mean, I dare say that, an average salary of $35,000 to $39,000 a year in today's world doesn't go up as far as it used to. That's for sure. So, I mean, there's no question about that. So, and I think moreover, though, I think there's an attitude that pervades, or a mindset that pervades, this perception of union and union workers, where it's potentially a sense of entitlement, right? Where I'm entitled to this. And again, this incident with the government recently, I think, cast the light a lot more on the lives of these 55,000 people and what they actually do and how much they really work and how much they really get paid, right? But I mean, there are other unions around, in Ontario and in the world that, I mean, there's a sense of resentment because of these pensions and these benefits and things where, I've been business for self my entire adult life, and I don't have a pension, I don't have benefits, I pay for everything. I need to earn whatever I need to do. So, and I think that's unfortunate that everybody gets painted with that same brush, right? Because a union's a union's a union's a union, right? And yet, it was enlightening to me to understand this group that CUPE represents in terms of how hard these people work, what the conditions they were working and under, and now to hear how much they actually get remunerated for it is, I'm surprised that half of them haven't quit and gone out into the private sector to get other jobs or try to find other jobs. Right?
There's quite a few that are leaving
Right.
on a daily, weekly basis. They just can't do it anymore. They love the job, but they can't support their families anymore.
Right. And I mean, and I guess, the trade-off being though that, and again, I don't want to offend anybody when I say this, and I'm not intending to do that anyway, but I mean, some of that is it's not a skilled position in terms of having a specialized trade or anything like that, right? And so sometimes there's an educational component too that's missing, and so they fit that bill, right? I mean, and so I guess what's those that are qualified, obviously, you're right. Why wouldn't you go out into the world and try to find a better way, a path forward, right? And then how much of your membership is at a demographic now where they're going to be retiring off over the next?
Quite a few. And quite a few have seen, saw the writing on the wall going into bargaining and decided to retire early because they didn't think that we were going to see anything. They didn't think anything was going to get better. They didn't think anything was going to change. So they decided to retire early. And on that note, Stephen Lecce was famous for saying we have one of the best pension plans in the country, which is not true because the average EA that works full-time and has been working for about 20 years or so before they retire, their yearly pension would be about $6,500.
Yeah, so that's certainly not...
No.
You're not going to go retire in Hawaii on that or anything.
No. And a lot of our workers that do retire come back on the casual list because they just can't manage completely on their pensions and need that extra.
Or they're going to be at Tim Hortons or Starbucks or something like that, or doing some kind of part-time casual work or something like that. Yeah. And I mean, yeah, and we see it in the healthcare system, right? With nurses that can't retire essentially, right? Or are being asked to come back and fill roles. Yeah. Well, listen, Erin, I won't keep you any longer. I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate your insights into what is certainly, a topic that affects all of us, right? I mean, not only the members of our community, the parents in our community, the children in our community. So I'm really fortunate to I'm glad you came in, and thank you for taking the time to give us the information. So, and best of luck. Best of luck in with your career in the union and the future of CUPE 1480. Then.
Thank you.
So, all right.
Thanks.